one more time. How about now? Can you hear me now? Working with phone and computer screens, trying to see if we can get the sound to work. I apologize. Right now it's yes. Okay, good. All right, Dave, just tell me if you, as long as you can hear me, that's great. All right, all right. Take two. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Danny Brusell with WellCrafted Workshops. Thank you for joining me today. I work with Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson. We offer 2-day workshops every month in Dallas, Texas, as well as provide corporations trainings at their places of business. And we also offer trainings online just like this. We like to keep them small, groups of 10 to 12 people. That way you're able to receive the individualized attention you deserve on crafting your speech, but you also have the opportunity to watch other people as they find their stories that are going to connect with audiences. We help individuals, entrepreneurs, and businesses leverage speaking on stages as a major client lead source. I really love what we do because we really believe that you are just a well-crafted story away from 7 figures. So today, what our purpose is I was going to answer any questions that you may have. And I'm looking at questions in the chat right now. I got all kinds of different screens going. So we'll start right away. So question number 1, how can storytelling help me stand out in a competitive market? Well, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. It came from Rachel. Rachel, well, tell us where you're from, Rachel. I love that. Well, storytelling, first of all, it humanizes your brand. I always like to say that Jimmy has a background from Broadway, and my background is in education. So I call us the professor and the poet. But Jimmy gives this great statistic. He actually read a book for this. I was very excited about that. From Jerome Bruner, who used to be a researcher at NYU. And Jerome Bruner, Dr. Bruner, said that you're more likely to remember a story 22 times more over a statistic. Now, maybe it's the skeptic in me as a researcher myself. I never understand where they get those numbers, and I don't know how you can prove that number. But I like the point of the number is we remember stories, we don't remember statistics. It was, of all people, it was Joseph Stalin who once said, 1 million people dead is a statistic. 1 person dead is a tragedy. Translation, facts tell, stories sell. It also helps you build credibility and trust with your audience. I always like to give the example of Howard Schultz. The reason that Starbucks offers its employees free healthcare and educational opportunities for secondary education is because Howard Schultz grew up in the projects, very poor, and he wanted to make sure that none of his employees ever had to fear healthcare and that they could get the college education that they deserved. So that's a great way of humanizing Starbucks. Maybe that's why they're able to get away with charging $6 for a coffee, a cup of joe. It's also a way to create yourself as a memorable, it's a memorable differentiator. I like to point out the 1984 ad that Apple ran was a major differentiator that made Apple stand out with their primary competition at the time, which was IBM. Remember IBM? Yeah, they used to be competition at the time. Another great thing about creating your well-crafted story is it's able to help you make data engaging. One of my favorite books, you should all get this book, is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. Chip is a business school professor at Stanford. His brother Dan runs a software company in North Carolina, an educational software company. And they talk about the importance of stories and getting ideas and facts to stick in people's heads so people always remember them. The best way to do that is by telling a story. And then finally, storytelling is a great way to appeal to the different types of people in your audience. We actually talk about this in day 2 of our workshop. Is every audience has what we call a Joe Friday and a Julia Roberts. So I like to stereotype and say it's kind of like a married couple. So The Joe Fridays in the audience are usually the guys, the husband, sitting like this in the audience. And this is a guy who wants to know just the facts. He wants to know how much is this going to cost me? When's it going to take place? What am I going to get out of it? And so you have to have a very different offer for that person as opposed to his wife, who we call Julia Roberts, who just wants to feel good. Is this going to make me feel good, better about myself? She's more of an emotional type of learner. And the best presentations, the most effective presenters, create stories that meets the needs of both of those people in their audience. So hopefully that answered your question. I really appreciate it. We'll get to the second question, which is from Dave in San Diego. Dave, thank you for your question, and thank you for telling me where you're from. Dave asked, will simplifying my message through storytelling compromise my professionalism or authority? Actually, well, that's a great question. I love that. Actually, it'll do exactly the opposite. It'll help you demonstrate your mastery through clarity. I love to point out the example of Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics in, I don't remember what year, but he was put on the panel of 12 experts to explain to Congress in 1986 how the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up. And Feynman, rather than using scientific speak, which none of the Congress people would have understood, he took an O-ring and put it in a glass of ice water and demonstrated to the committee. He said, you see, it doesn't expand. It always stays at the same point. And that's basically what caused the O-ring to blow up the Challenger. He gave a very vivid example that everybody could understand. I always thought that was a thing with Einstein. I don't know if he was the most brilliant person ever to live, but what made him really brilliant was he was able to take these complex concepts and paint better pictures for people. When he was talking about the speed of light, he talked about a person writing the speed of light. He was able to connect with the general masses, so he was understandable. So I really think storytelling is a way to actually demonstrate your professionalism and authority. Definitely, it helps you demonstrate your mastery. And it's a great way to connect with your audience as well. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's research. She's in Houston, Texas, and she talks about the importance of your vulnerability, sharing your vulnerabilities with your audience. This is something Jimmy and I stress all the time. If you really want to be an effective speaker, you shouldn't be listing off all of your accomplishments. You should be really talking about your struggles and how you overcame them, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you talk about your own struggles, they're going to connect with you. And that's the most important part of any presentation, is how do I connect with my audience so that they see themselves in me and I'm the person that can guide them. I love Donald Miller has a wonderful company, Story Brand, and he says that the point of the person that's speaking is they're supposed to position themselves as the guide and make their audience into the hero. So you should be Yoda talking to Luke Skywalker. You should be there's all kinds of Mr. Miyagi talking to Daniel's son. Make your audience into the hero. It's a great way to preserve your core message by providing context. President Reagan, he was the first president, I believe, that during his State of the Union address, he didn't talk about healthcare. Healthcare was too complex of a concept, and so President Reagan get up there. He's like, it's like Joe Thompson. Joe, stand up. And this guy stands up in the gallery. He's like, Joe works at the GM factory in Louisville, Kentucky, and Joe got injured on the job, but he doesn't have health insurance, and he's having trouble paying his rent because he doesn't have health insurance. Okay. What he did was brilliant. What President Reagan was doing was, now when we think healthcare, we think of Joe. We think of our neighbor that has had something bad happen to them and they don't have the money to pay for it, which is a brilliant tactic. And again, by simplifying it, you're not dumbing it down for you. You're absolutely doing the exact opposite. You're bringing more people into the framework. It's a great way to enhance engagement with your audience by simplifying things. I mean, you're going to have to bear with me. I love reading and I love movies. And so I like to give lots of book recommendations and movie recommendations. So really one of the best examples for this, because we work with a lot of attorneys, is the movie My Cousin Vinny. My Cousin Vinny, when Vinny wants to connect with the jury, basically the background of the movie is he's down in Alabama trying to convince a jury that his cousin is innocent of this crime he's been accused of. And so he's talking to the jury. He's a New Yorker talking to people from the South, and he's questioning one of the witnesses, and he asked the witness about grits. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I was making my grits. It only took me 5 minutes before I saw what happened." He's like, "Really? It only took you 5 mintes? You know, every person from Alabama knows it takes 20 minutes to cook a real grit." And all of a sudden, the witness realizes he's made a mistake, and all the people in the jury are like, "Yeah, it does take 20 minutes." He's like, "Do you have magic grits? What kind of grits do you have?" And he's able to convince the jury based on an example all of them understand. Later in the movie, his girlfriend, Marissa Tomei, she's talking to the jury about the car and the wheels, and she's like, "Oh, well, the tires, anybody that's ever been caught in the mud in Alabama can tell you that you're going to have a tough time getting out." And you see all the jury nodding their heads because all of them have experienced that. It's actually brilliant, simplifying the concept so that everybody can relate to it. And most importantly, a really great speaker when they're, you're not compromised. I'm going to give you an example. You get to address the audience's needs. So one of my favorite books is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's about Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet. This is a true story, by the way. President Lincoln, when he became president, he took all of his political rivals and made them his cabinet. It's unbelievable what this guy, he has one of my favorite quotes ever. He said, "I know the best way to defeat my enemies. I shall make them my friends." And one of the things that President Lincoln was great about was during the Civil War, during tense moments in cabinet meetings, he would always tell a story. They talk about this in the movie Lincoln. They say Lincoln is based on Team of Rivals. I think maybe 4 minutes was used from the book. But there is a great scene where Edwin Stanton, who's the Secretary of War, he looks at President Lincoln and he's like, "Oh, don't tell another story." And President Lincoln, to loosen up the mood, he's like, "Well, when one of the founding fathers, Ethan Allen, he was sent to England to be an ambassador, and the British soldiers, they thought they'd poke fun at him, and so in the latrine they posted a painting of General Washington, and they were playing cards with Ethan Allen that night, waiting for him to have to do his business, and eventually he had to, so he went out to the latrine, came back in, and all the soldiers were snickering, and they said, "Did you see the portrait of George Washington in the outhouse?" And Ethan Allen said, "Well, of course I did." And the soldiers are taken aback. They're like, "It did not offend you?" And Ethan Allen says, "Oh, no, every American knows that the sight of President Washington scares the crap out of the British." Well, how do you not love a guy that can totally loosen up the mood in a tense situation? So that's the power of storytelling in your presentations. Again, you have to connect with your audience. This is all about them. I want you to think, this is very serious. You have to think about this. Your speech can help your audience for a little while, but your offer, whatever that offer is, whether it's your coaching program or your product or your cause, that can actually help a person a lifetime. And the way you have to view your speech is everybody in your audience is sick and you have the antidote. And if they don't take your antidote, they're going to die. So this is how we present presentations. It's not about sales. It is about service, serving your audience. So thank you for that nice comment, Jeff. I appreciate that. Next question. I'm giving you 5 questions today. 5 questions. Excuse me. Question number 3. How will this workshop help me convert public speaking engagements into actual business opportunities? Well, thank you. I don't even see a name for that one, but thank you, whoever did that. Well, really, it helps. So here's something you have to understand. People do business with people, not with businesses. It's all about the relationships. I watched a great speaker, Glenn Morshower. He's always voted like the guy that everybody sees in movies. They don't know his name. I don't know what they call that, but Glenn is a hoot, and he's a great speaker. And he talks about he was at an audition, and he was supposed to audition at 8 o'clock, and they were running way behind schedule. It was about 10 o'clock, and finally the producers they brought him in to audition him, and they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry, we're behind." He's like, "Oh, it's all right. I was just practicing my spoons." And they're like, "What?" And he's like, "Just practicing my spoons." And he starts doing this. He's like, "I was doing this in the hallway," and everybody starts laughing, and they're like, "Well, we don't know how we're going to cast you, but we're working with you." Well, he instantly connected. He did something this is why I love humor. Humor is a great way to connect with audiences. Most people, you know, all these other speaking coaches, I see them say, "Oh, talk about being in that dark room when daddy touched you." And there's three reasons why I don't like doing that. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had a lot of bad things happen to them. I don't think we need to hear another sad story. I think we need to hear stories about hope. Second of all, what Jimmy and I are teaching people is how to create a speech that you're going to deliver again and again. So politicians will call this their stump speech. This is a speech they introduce themselves to new audiences like 20 times a day. In like superhero movies, they call it your origin story. How did Wolverine get his superpowers? I love the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. This is basically your visionary statement talking about why you do what you do. In his research, Daniel Pink, his book Drive, this is basically your purpose-driven speech. What compels you to do what you do? This is how you introduce yourself to audiences. Again, don't worry about the name source. You can call it peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't matter. This is your fingerprint. This is what makes you uniquely you. And this is why it's really important to add a lot of your own personal stories. One of the ways that we're going to help you convert is by helping you build your credibility. I already shared with you one of probably the single best strategy I share with people is don't talk about your successes, talk about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you share your own struggles, the more you're going to relate to your audience, and they're going to love you for that. There's a reason that no presidential candidate ever grew up middle class. They all were born in a log cabin. Motivational speakers, it's always the same. They were washing dishes in their bathtub, or they lived in their garage, or I love to say I was homeless and I was living under a bridge, and a truck went over a pothole and a book fell out and it hit me on the head. And I was just kind of annoyed, but I had nothing better to do because I was homeless. So I sat there and I read the book, and it was about investing in real estate with no money down. And it kind of made sense to me. So I purchased a home, and then I purchased another one. And pretty soon I had about 10 properties, and all of my homeless friends, they came to me and said, "Hey, can you teach us how to invest in real estate with no money down?" This is what you hear this all the time. What they're trying to do is to relate, "Oh, I came from nothing and I was able to make it on my own." That's the whole purpose there. It really, when you're connecting with your audience with an effective, well-crafted story, it's that connection part. So there's a concept known as the primacy and recency effect. And what this means is that the bun's more important than the burger. People remember the beginning of your speech and the end of your speech, but they don't remember anything that you teach them in between. This is why it's so important for you to make that positive first impression and leave a wonderful last impression. We help you in the workshop craft a persuasive call to action. And the way we do that is, this is a mistake I see a lot of people do in their presentations, is they wait till the very end of their presentation to sell whatever they're trying to sell. And that's a mistake. First of all, you got to get out of that mindset. You're not selling, you're serving. And second of all, you're not really speaking. You're a farmer. You're planting seeds throughout your presentation. And Coach Jimmy and I, we show you some of the specific strategies we use with all of our clients on how you can plant seeds throughout your presentation to get people to want to do further business with you. Another part about creating a well-crafted story is really just the relatability factor. Again, you're gonna have to bear with me with movie examples. Tommy Boy, Tommy's dad, the way he's always doing business deals is he's drinking with the guys and he's telling them jokes that they all laugh about. And he's like, "Hey, you can trust me." And they all laugh because they relate to him. People like to do business that they relate to. in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Pee-wee Herman accidentally goes into a biker bar and they all want to kill him. And he says, "Can't I have one last request?" And I'm like, "Sure." And so he puts on these high top, these huge shoes, huge soles, and he does this dance to the song Tequila, and it gets all the motorcyclists all laughing, and they're like, "Oh, we can relate to this guy." Well, that's what he's doing. He's relating. He's relating. This is your primary purpose when you're on stage. Again, people don't do business with businesses. They do business with people that they like. And really, the most important part of any well-crafted story is to help you stand out. My wife, she loved Costco, and I mean, she shops at Costco all the time. I mean, I got to admit, before I married my wife, I didn't actually know you could return merchandise. I once bought a record when I was a kid. Yeah, an actual record. And it was scratched. I was like, "Oh man, that stinks." I didn't know you could return it. I mean, my wife, she'll return like produce to Costco. And I always thought Costco was crazy. I'm like, why do they accept all these returns? And now I realize they're so brilliant because I won't shop anywhere else because I totally trust Costco. I know that they have my back. That's what your goal is as a speaker, is you want your audience to know that you got their back. All right, so thank you for that question, whoever you are. Let me go to the next question is from Eduardo. Thank you, Eduardo. Eduardo from Mexico City. Wow, thank you, Eduardo. Eduardo writes, "I'm nervous about public speaking. How does the workshop address speaking anxiety and help build confidence?" Thank you for that, Eduardo. That's great. Well, what we do is we provide you with a clear structure to help you reduce your anxiety. I mean, what we're providing you is our formula for how to create a well-crafted story. It's a recipe. I mean, I don't know how to cook very well, but if you gave me a recipe on how to create chocolate chip cookies and I followed that recipe, I'm pretty sure I could create decent chocolate chip cookies. And the more I practice it, it would get better every single time. That's exactly what we're providing you at our workshop. Is we're providing you the formula that you can use this structure, whether you're speaking to a lot of people, to a few people, or maybe just one-to-one. This format works in a ballroom. It works in a boardroom. It works in a classroom. It works in a courtroom. It works in a showroom. Heck, it even works in a restroom. I don't recommend you do that, but one of our clients, he did his pitch at a urinal. I hope he washed his hands. Here, I'll give you an example. I work a lot in education. So I was in India touring schools throughout India. And I went to one school, and the principal, he opened up the door. There's like 5,000 kids in this auditorium. There's like 20 newspapers and 5 TV stations. And the principal says, "And for the next hour, Dr. Brissell is going to teach us the 3 secrets to reading better." Nobody has told me that I'm speaking, and I have no such speech. But I got a huge audience right there in front of me. Unfortunately, it was India, so I get to slow down my speech. I speak fast because I get excited when I speak. So I look at the kids. I'm like, "Today, I am going to teach you the 3 secrets to reading better. Who in here wants to learn the 3 secrets to reading better?" And the kids are going wild. And in my head, I'm like, what the heck are the 3 secrets to reading better? And basically, during those 30 seconds, I was putting together a speech in my head. I created a 1-hour talk based on those points. And I actually created a company based on that speech. That's the power of formula that you're going to learn at our 2-day well-crafted story workshop. Yeah, Jeff says, "My best business relationships began with the story." Exactly. It's all about the story. People remember stories. They don't remember statistics. Again, really, this is the important thing too. Another strategy that Jimmy and I are always teaching people, and this will come with experience, is you need to turn all of your eyes to use. It's not about you. When you're on stage, you're there to serve people. Is how can I best serve the people on there? And the more you think about them, you're going to have a lot less stage fright because it's not about you, it's about them. We're going to help you practice some confidence building techniques at the workshop. One of the ones that Jimmy does, which I do as well, is when he's giving a presentation to a large group, he just looks for the person with a smiling face, and he directs that talk as if he's speaking one-to-one to that person. It helps calm him down. I always tell people there's two ways you get better as a speaker. First of all, you have to watch lots of speakers. I mean, Jimmy and I, we watch at least 10 speakers a day. I mean, I watch politicians, I watch comedians, I watch televangelists, I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups, in front of men, in front of women. Here, I'll give you a ninja strategy right now. I like to watch a lot of televised award shows because when the person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to give a speech. Now, I want to see how they use those 45 seconds. I want to see if they can connect with their audience. Now, most people, they waste their time. They get up there, they're like, I want to thank the Academy, I want to thank God. It's just a waste of time. But every now and then, somebody does an incredible job. So a few years ago, there was a gentleman, I think his name was Joe Walker, who won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Well, this is Hollywood. All the important people are in the audience, the actors. And you can see nobody's paying attention to film editing. They're kind of talking to one another. And Joe Walker gets on stage, he accepts his award, and he's British, and he's very deliberate in the way he speaks. He looks at and he says, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. Well, now the camera pans the audience and you see people kind of leaning in like, what's he talking about? He continues, for example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. All of a sudden you see all the audience laughing hysterically. I mean, he gets off stage. Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Time magazine said it was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards that year. That's the power of a well-crafted story. He was able to connect in 45 seconds. I just thought it was absolutely incredible. I use stories to engage the audience, and we work with people and they'll write down every single part of their speech. They're so nervous. And I always like to share this. Can I share a secret with you? I've actually never written a speech in my life. What I do is I illegally download all these images off of Google. I put them in a PowerPoint, and those pictures guide me through the stories that I want to share with my audience and the teaching points I want to make. Walt Disney said that people think in pictures. And if you don't believe me, here, I'll give you an exercise right now. I want you to think of an apple. Take about 5 seconds. Think of an apple. And in the chat, write down what kind of apple you thought of. Tell me the apple that you thought of. I'll see people writing down, oh, I thought of a Granny Smith green apple. I thought of a Red Delicious apple. I thought of a Fuji apple. Some people will say, I thought of an Apple computer. I have never once had a person say, oh, I thought of APPLE, because people don't think in words. They think in pictures. That's how I'm demonstrating that to you, is people think in pictures. Again, when you're nervous, this is one of the reasons we're showing you how to leverage your personal stories to engage your audience and to boost your authenticity, because you might not be able to remember other stories, but you can remember your own story. So for example, when I was in India, I spoke to this large group of students, got the kids all pumped up, and Honeycrisp apple, good. I was speaking to all these students and got the kids all pumped up. And after my presentation, this 6-year-old boy comes up to me and he's got tears in his eyes. And then I notice he's missing his left arm, and he looks up at me. He's like, Dr. Purcell, how can I succeed? And so I bend to his level, get to his eye level, and I say, when I was your age, I went to 18 different schools before I was 12 years old. Everybody called me stupid because I stuttered. And eventually I went to a school, and there was a teacher that worked one-on-one with me, and she would sing things to me, and I found I could sing them back without having my stutter. It's kind of like the movie The King's Speech. And eventually I lost my stutter and I became a swan. But I looked at that little boy and I said, isn't it interesting that the little boy everybody said was stupid and couldn't talk right now gets paid a lot of money to travel the world to do what? And the little boy got this big grin on his face and he said, "Speak." And I said, "Yeah, don't let anybody ever tell you what you can't do. Nothing's impossible." This is why I miss teaching, but I love teaching my clients now, coaching. I'll tell you exactly what I always tell my students. Sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. Now let's go make this world a better place. This is my mission in life. This is why I love working with people. So if you're nervous speaking, I can tell you there is light at the end of the tunnel. If there's anybody who knows about that light, it's me. And one of the things that I'm trying to go over all the different things that Jimmy and I will go through. But another thing that we do is we will transform your nervous energy into positive energy. You know, some here's something a lot of people don't know. Your audience actually wants you to succeed because they don't want to be uncomfortable. It's there's nothing more uncomfortable than watching a bad speaker. And so if you're nervous, tell the audience you're nervous. I'm nervous. They're gonna cheer you on. They're gonna root for you. They're gonna have your back. And so there's all kinds of different strategies that we share during the 2-day workshop to help you bust over that fear. All right. Great question. Thank you, Eduardo, for that question. Hopefully, I answered it for you. I try to be I try to give you long answers, very thorough answers, and research based, and movie based, and book based. Next question comes from Jasmine in Chennai, India. Holy cow. That's where I was, Jasmine, Chennai. She asked, how can storytelling help me build long-term trust with clients or investors? And you're a financial planner. Okay. Well, obviously, it's one way of demonstrating transparency and authenticity. I suggested earlier that no presidential candidate or motivational speaker ever grew up middle class. They always have to show that they went through all kinds of trials and tribulations and lived the American dream. It's also a great way to, you should be, especially as a financial planner, you should showcase all of your, you can showcase your credibility through real life examples. So talk about clients that you serve that have really succeeded well. So two of the stories I love to share about people that attended our 2-day workshop. First one is Gustavo. Gustavo should be the president of the United States. Gustavo came to America 30 years ago from Ecuador, didn't speak a word of English, worked every menial job, saved every dime, invested in real estate. 30 years later, the guy's worth like $40 million. He's an amazing guy. And so Gustavo, his offer that we were working on with him, his offer to his audience was a 4-month real estate coaching program for $40,000. Wow. That's a tall offer. Very tall offer. But, I told you, you get better at speaking 2 ways. Oh, I actually only mentioned one earlier. See, I get off track. So you get better at speaking 2 ways. First of all, you watch a lot of speakers. And second of all, one of my mentors was a guy named Jim Rohn. And Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the reps. You got to do your work, so you got to be out there speaking. I always tell people, go out, speak. Every town has service organizations like Lions Club, Rotary Club, Optimist Club, Kiwanis Club. Speak to schools, speak to synagogues, to churches, to temples, to chambers of commerce. Gustavo then mentioned, he's like, oh, I'm going on a podcast tonight. I'm like, make the pitch. You got to do it tonight. And here's my phone number. You got to call me tomorrow, Gustavo. So Gustavo calls me the next day. He's all excited. He's like, Danny, you're a genius. I'm like, did you go on the podcast? He's like, yes. I'm like, did you make the offer? He's like, yes. I'm like, you're selling it? He's like, 23. Folks, reading is my specialty, not math. But if I'm doing my math calculations correctly, Gustavo made $920,000 that night on a pitch we had crafted that day. And ever since then, we're still in touch. This is about a year and a half ago. He's made 8 figures off of that speech. That's the power of a well-crafted story. But really, the satisfaction for me, my wife's like, you should take a cut of that. Maybe I should. But what really pleases me is Gustavo, he did the work. When I was teaching, whether I was teaching my little ones or my older ones, as they left my classroom for the day, I always reminded them, remember, kids, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. Only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. So go out, do the right thing. Let's make this world a better place. That's what I believe. I think that, so that's an example, a real life example, Jasmine. I'll give you another real life example. I know you have in financial planning, there are people, couples that they didn't do proper retirement planning, and then they came to you and you were able to help solve their crises, or they were trying to buy their first home. These are the types of stories. Talk about those client testimonials. I had another guy we worked with 3 years ago, Jason. And Jason, he was just starting off in his business. I mean, Jimmy and I, we can brag about all the famous people we worked with, Olympic gold medalists and CEOs. But the people that we get the most energy from are people just like most of you, which are probably people that are starting out, or people, we work with financial planners. We work with lots of real estate people. We work with attorneys. We work with people in multi-level marketing and direct marketing. And we work with all kinds of entrepreneurs. And those are the people I like the most. So we worked with a guy, Jason, about 3 years ago, and Jason had 0 clients, just starting out. And I said, you got to do the reps. I said, if nothing else, go on Facebook Live tonight and practice your speech, because it's going to stink. So Jason, he did his speech that night on Facebook Live. One woman from Ontario, Canada, accidentally watched him, and he stunk. Well, he went on Facebook Live the next day, and 3 people watched him, and he stunk. But he stunk a little bit less than the first time. He has done this same presentation every single day for the last 3 years. He now has 6,000 people in his group, and he made almost 7 figures last year. And what makes me proud about Jason is he did the work. You're only going to get better with reps. This is how you get better at anything, and it's definitely the way you get better at speaking. Another thing that I like about building long-term trust with clients or investors, it gives you a chance to build those emotional connections. I mean, yeah, we do work with, I've got a guy right now I'm working with, Botter. Botter's amazing. He's climbed the 7 highest peaks on every continent. He swims with sharks in Madagascar. He does the Iditarod in Alaska. He's crazy. Like, Botter, nobody can relate to you. You've done all these magnificent things. That's why I always tell people the best stories are those simple stories that all of us experience. This is why I love, here's an exercise for you. After I do this Q&A, I want you to go home later tonight, get in a comfortable chair with a pen and paper, get a glass of your favorite libation. And for an hour, I just want you to write every story that's ever happened in your life. And I don't mean the whole story. I just mean triggers, like the time I locked myself out of the car in front of Costco, the time Dad spilt mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. In like an hour, you'll come up with 400 or 500 of these stories. So that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is then you're going to figure out, well, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a story about accountability. Oh, this is a story about never giving up. Oh, this is a story about taking action. And so, like on my computer, I literally have tens of thousands of stories. So when I'm asked to give speeches based on my audience and the problem I'm trying to solve, I'll look for, oh, okay, I need some stories about trust. I need some stories about loyalty, things like that. That is my recommendation, and that's why I think that the simple stories are the ones everybody connects with. I love childhood stories because everybody peed their pants in first grade. Everybody's had that embarrassing moment in front of others. Every spouse has had that argument where which way do you have the toilet paper? Does it go up or does it go down? Those are great. My wife, I was on a diet. You need to know this about me. I'm a weight loss expert. I've lost over 1,000 pounds. The problem is I've gained over 1,250 for a net gain of 250 pounds. But I was on one of my fad diets I was doing. The guy wanted me to eat more fish. I didn't want to eat fish at all. And my wife's like, "Oh, you should have ahi tuna. It tastes just like steak." I'm like, "Whatever." Well, then I went to Outback Steakhouse and I had to have this ahi steak appetizer. I'm like, or ahi steak. It's fish. I'm like, oh my gosh, it tastes just like steak. And now I eat ahi steak all the time. I love it. It's healthier for me. It tastes just like steak. So she found a better way. People like those types of stories, things that all of us have locked ourselves out of the car. All of us have something like that. And really the most important thing about stories is it gives you an opportunity to humanize your business. This is why the best companies, they have a story. Like Airbnb is bigger. it's the largest value. It's valued like 8 times what Marriott, the largest hotel chain on the planet, is worth. And Airbnb doesn't own a single facility. But the guys that started Airbnb, they have a wonderful story about there was a convention in San Francisco, and they thought they could make some extra money, so they made some inflatable air air mattresses in their living room and showed people around San Francisco, charged them, and then they expanded it to I think in 2008 the Democratic Convention in Denver, and they were able to get people hosting people, and then they learned a lot of people wouldn't take it because there was bad photos, and so they started helping people with the photos that they were doing. So they have a really compelling story. Apple, Steve Jobs is probably the best salesperson ever. He always started off. It's actually something when I used to teach my students how to write, the 2 greatest words to start any sentence is "what if," and Steve Jobs was great with that. He'd say, "What if there was a way to have 1,000 songs at the tip of your fingers?" And that's how he introduced the iPod. What if there was a way, he always created Apple as a story. That's where he was a genius. It was all about story. That's why when he competes with Microsoft, I watched an interview with him, and he said he had no problem with Bill Gates or Microsoft. He had a problem with their products are ugly and they're difficult to use. And it's funny. He's right about that. Like I used to use all PCs, and then one of my PCs was stolen. I had to go to the bathroom at a talk in Albany, New York, and when I returned, my computer was gone, and I needed a computer. And a friend gave me an Apple, and I started playing with the Apple. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier to use. It's very intuitive. When I'm stuck with a problem on a PC, I have to think about all the different steps I have to take. On an Apple, I just stop myself and say, what's the simplest way to solve this problem? And 9 times out of 10, that works. It's absolutely amazing. So that's how what you're trying to do. Again, this is the most important thing about any story is you're trying to connect with your audience, because people do business with people just like them. So I've been on for a long time. Just to answer 5 questions. Hopefully this has been useful for all of you. For more information on our 2-day workshops, we would love for you to go to WellCraftedStoryWorkshop.com. Again, WellCraftedStoryWorkshop.com. Please like our LinkedIn page. We give you all kinds of great little strategies, chopping up videos for you, trying to serve you. And by all means, if there's other questions that you have, please send them our way so that we can address them. Jimmy's going to come on tomorrow to address questions. I think we're going to try and do this every single week. We're here to serve you. So on behalf of Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson, I'm Dr. Danny Brissell. Thank you for joining us. And remember, you are just a well-crafted story away from 7 figures. Thanks, everybody. God bless.